Well, I do think the Sussex overdrive is unbelievable, but I mean, I don't think that he is going to get back in, which showed that he is very commercially minded, which we'll get into later on, which
Yeah.
makes it impossible for him. And of course, Meghan wouldn't come back to Britain. Harry and Meghan, the other side, smiling and all the rest of it, is that Meghan.
There are moments in the trajectory of a public figure where the carefully constructed facade does not merely crack, it completely shatters, leaving the reality underneath exposed to a harsh and unforgiving light. According to the veteran biographer Tom Bower, we are currently witnessing precisely this phenomenon with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. For years, Meghan Markle has built a global brand predicated on a very specific, carefully controlled narrative, one of personal struggle.
And now we know it's Meghan speaking again. And so this isn't because the book contains that her brand was in great trouble. American Riviera Orchard, that she had allegedly nicked the idea. She wanted wealth and she wanted fame. And she targeted, there's no doubt she targeted Harry. And that was very critical because at that moment last year, she was about to promote her Netflix series and didn't want to firstly be seen with Harry, and secondly didn't want to go somewhere where she'd appear.
Royal injustice, deep emotional wounds, and a sense of being perpetually misunderstood by a cruel and archaic institution. However, the relentless passage of time and the forensic scrutiny of investigative journalism have begun to dismantle this story, piece by piece. Bower, widely regarded as one of the most feared biographers in the United Kingdom, argues that the truth is finally catching up to the Sussexes.
Cheap are declining. I think that his reputation is somewhat toxic, and I think Invictus is his only lifeline, and that's what she used as a weapon at the time. So there were quite a few things about her personal life. I'll work them into another book, I think. Meghan didn't like the surname Mountbatten Windsor. If you remember, in her first lifestyle series with Meghan with Them Forever, she says to Carling that her surname isn't Markle but Sussex. And she was desperate to get it. She said we never had a proper surname, and of course they did. By not telling the palace what she's going to do. And I think the most interesting story is the Reitman story. Reitman's is like a Marks and Spencer's in Canada.
And the resulting collision between fantasy and reality is proving catastrophic for their future. The current state of affairs, often described as the Sussex overdrive, appears to be a frantic attempt to regain relevance in a world that is increasingly turning its back. The momentum that once propelled Harry and Meghan to the forefront of global celebrity culture has stalled, replaced by a growing skepticism regarding their commercial viability and their personal credibility. The evidence of this decline is nowhere more apparent than in the drying up of their revenue streams. The lucrative podcasting deals that promised to make them media moguls have evaporated.
In Revenge, you talk about how Meghan's lack of knowledge about British history meant she could not understand that Diana had won the public's affection.
She was warned before she married what the nature of being Harry's wife and part of the royal family would be, and the nature of how she ignored all that advice for two reasons. One is she really did believe she could do what she wanted. And secondly, I don't believe she ever intended to stay. She always intended to take the title, take the connections and get back.
With executives publicly expressing dissatisfaction with the output, the Netflix connection, once their primary lifeline to financial independence, seemingly hangs by a thread as the novelty of their royal complaints wears off. Meghan's attempts to launch new ventures, such as the much-discussed American Riviera Orchard, have been met with a lukewarm reception, plagued by accusations of unoriginality and a lack of clear strategic direction. The overarching problem, as Bower identifies it, is that Meghan has effectively run out of road. She has no major income source remaining, her lifestyle brand is struggling to find its footing, and the vast wealth and fame she allegedly targeted when pursuing Harry are proving far more difficult to sustain outside the protective umbrella of the royal family. What makes Tom Bower's assessment of this situation so particularly damning is his unique position in the landscape of British journalism. He is not merely a commentator offering opinions from the sidelines. He is an investigative force who powerful figures genuinely fear. Over decades, he has cultivated a reputation for digging where others refuse to go, interviewing those who have been silenced, and exposing the hypocrisy of the elite with brutal efficiency. His biographies of prime ministers, billionaires, and royals have shredded public relations machines to pieces, and his focus on the Sussexes has been no different. There is a telling detail in the dynamic between Bower and the Sussex camp that often goes overlooked. Despite their propensity for litigation, Harry and Meghan have never sued him. For a couple that has threatened legal action over headlines, jokes, tweets, and even satire, their avoidance of Bauer is significant. The reason Bauer implies is simple: he documents everything. He relies on evidence, receipts, witness testimony, and contradictions in their own stories. He does not deal in gossip. He deals in confirmation. When he asserts that a narrative is false, he does so with the confidence of a man who can prove it in court, and that silence from the Sussex legal team speaks volumes. One of the most critical areas where Bauer dismantles the Meghan Markle mythology is the narrative of her childhood and her relationship with her father, Thomas Markle. The story Meghan has told the world is one of a lonely, struggling upbringing, characterized by cheap meals, bargain salad bars, and the hardships of a latchkey kid. It was a narrative that sounded cinematic and heartbreaking, perfectly designed to elicit sympathy and frame her as a self-made survivor. However, Bauer's research paints a radically different picture. He uncovered a reality where Thomas Markle paid for elite private schooling, expensive ballet classes, photography lessons, and designer clothes. This was a father who picked her up from school, drove her to auditions, paid for her car, funded her university education at Northwestern, and supported every dream she wanted to chase. The narrative of the struggling victim was, according to Bauer, a branding exercise that required the erasure of the supportive father. When the image of the hero father no longer fit the story of the self-made woman, the history was rewritten, and the man who raised her was cast aside. This pattern of rewriting the past to center herself as a victim is, Bauer argues, the foundational flaw in her public persona. This habit of embellishing reality to suit the brand extends beyond her family life and into her brief tenure as a working royal. The famous story regarding the Procter & Gamble soap commercial, Meghan's origin myth of childhood activism, was scrutinized by Bauer, who found that the event was not supported by the record in the way she described. There were no letters of response, no evidence the event happened as the cinematic retelling suggested. It was another instance of a story being polished and manipulated until it served the purpose of the narrator rather than the truth. This manipulation reached its zenith during the infamous Oprah Winfrey interview, a broadcast that was intended to be the definitive statement of their suffering but instead became the catalyst for their credibility collapse. Bauer points to 17 proven inaccuracies in that interview alone, not minor memory lapses, but significant contradictions. The claim that they were secretly married 3 days before the royal wedding was debunked by the Archbishop himself. The suggestion that Archie was denied a title due to his race was proven false by protocols written long before Meghan entered the family. The assertion that she was denied mental health support was contradicted by palace logs indicating the availability of doctors and professionals. For Bauer, the Oprah interview did not expose the cruelty of the monarchy, it exposed the duplicity of the Duchess. However, the turning point in the relationship between Meghan's fantasy and the royal reality can be traced back to the tour of Australia in 2018. To the outside world, the tour looked like a triumph, with cheering crowds and glowing headlines suggesting that the Sussexes were the new power couple of the Commonwealth. Behind the scenes, however, the story was drastically different. Bauer's sources describe a duchess who behaved like a Hollywood celebrity, expecting VIP treatment rather than a servant of the crown. There were reports of tantrums, harsh treatment of aides, and the now infamous tea-throwing incident that shocked staff. But the deeper issue was psychological. Meghan reportedly believed that the crowds were cheering for her personally, convincing herself that she had already reached the iconic status of Princess Diana. It was during this tour that the harsh reality of the royal hierarchy set in. She realized that no matter how popular she became, she would always rank below William and Catherine. She did not want to be a supporting figure or stand in anyone's shadow. Bauer argues that this realization planted the seeds of their exit. She could not reconcile her self-perception as a global icon with the structural reality of being second-tier royalty. Perhaps the most visceral example of the clash between the Sussex brand and royal tradition was the controversy surrounding the naming of their daughter, Lilibet. Tom Bauer categorizes this moment as one of the lowest points in their conduct. The nickname Lilibet was not merely a cute family term, it was sacred to Queen Elizabeth II. It was a name used only by her parents, her late husband Prince Philip, and a tiny circle of trusted confidants. It belonged to her childhood and her most intimate private life. Instead of treating this with the reverence it deserved, the Sussexes turned it into a branding opportunity. While Harry claimed he had asked for permission, the palace took the extraordinary step of contradicting him, effectively telling the BBC that he had not asked, but rather announced it. The Queen was reportedly furious. For the palace to engage in a public dispute over such a personal matter signaled that the line had been crossed. It exposed exactly how Meghan and Harry viewed the monarchy, not as a family to respect, but as a marketing tool to exploit. This single decision, Bauer suggests, triggered a collapse in their credibility from which they have never truly recovered. The cynical nature of their operations was further highlighted during the period of mourning for Queen Elizabeth II.